Good evening and welcome to Chester County's virtual town tours and village walks. My name is Karen Marshall and I'm Chester County's Heritage Preservation Coordinator. I'm so excited to welcome back our many loyal town tour participants and to say welcome to everyone who's joining us for the first time this evening. Although we can't be together, Nancy Shields is here making sure that the program runs smoothly. Nancy, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hi everyone, welcome back to the second week of Town Tours and Village Walks. I hope you all get to enjoy historic Sugartown in person soon, because as you can see from the presentation, it is a hidden gem just outside of Melbourne Borough. Thank you for taking this virtual journey with us. Enjoy historic Sugartown.
Thanks, Nancy. It's been my pleasure to coordinate this program, now in its 26th year, for the past 14 summers. The program was initially conceived by my predecessor, Jane L.S. Davidson, as a way to encourage the county's extensive network of historical commissions and societies to showcase local history. Each summer on Thursday evening, free walking tours of Chester County's many historic sites and districts were presented by these organizations. As we all know, these are not normal times. This summer, through a special partnership with the Chester County Historic Preservation Network and 6 adventuresome historic sites, we are all excited to present the 26th annual program in a virtual format. Chester County is a very special place. As an original Pennsylvania county, it was founded in 1682 by William Penn and has a long and rich heritage that literally embodies the span of this country's development and history. Our well-preserved cultural landscape has many stories to tell. Tonight, we will be exploring the historic village of Sugartown as we continue tours reflecting art, architecture, and personal expression. Tonight's tour will introduce everyone to this remarkably intact and lovingly restored 19th century crossroads village. We will visit each of the buildings shown on this overview and learn how historic Sugartown, Inc. inspires new generations to value and connect with America's past through richly authentic historical experiences and the enduring preservation of this remarkable village. It's a wonderful Chester County story, and I encourage everyone to visit historic Sugartown once you've seen this program. Their hours are posted on their website. And now, Kathleen Hood will introduce you to the program. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Karen. Tonight's program, Historic Sugartown, which is being recorded, is the second in our 6-part virtual town tours and village walks series. This evening, our lineup includes a video-based presentation by our Sugartown team. And following the video presentation, we encourage you to stay on for a Q&A with our Sugartown panel and also for a very special closing. If you're interested in submitting questions during our program, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And first click the button and then type your question. We will answer as many questions as time permits. And now it is my great honor to introduce to you the lead Sugartown panelist, Heather Reifer, who is Executive Director of Historic Sugartown, Inc. Please welcome Heather Reifer.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Karen, for the great introduction as well. First, Historic Sugartown wants to thank the staff and volunteers of the Chester County Planning Commission for all their hard work in the creation of this video. They've spent countless hours pulling it together from our images and scripts and stories, and we're absolutely delighted with the result. So it has been a strange year for Historic Sugartown. We have spent the last several years 100% focused on creating experiences that would raise historic Sugartown's visibility in the community. We've created seasonal programs, including our winter tea, our lantern tours in October, and a Sugartown Christmas. We've partnered with a local brewery to offer summer beer gardens, and have developed a robust calendar of workshops in our phenomenal book bindery, which you'll see in a little bit. So we've been working on all of this, and 2020 had started out strong. Our programs were in full swing. We had a lot of details nailed down and getting ready to poised to press the button on a few events that were coming up in March. And our book bindery workshops were consistently selling out all winter long. But then March hit and everything stopped. Now that we're in the green phase, we've been able to resume our guided tours and some select workshops. Our guided tours are now available on Saturdays at 11 only, and they're by advance registration. And you can find out information and how to do that on our website at historicsugartown.org. We're still restricted from holding our beer gardens, and our fall programs are starting to look less and less likely because we're not allowed to have more than 250 people in a gathering on the site. The pandemic has brought us opportunities, though. We have had an exciting summer. Our book bindery instructor, Ramon Townsend, has developed an exciting new virtual book restoration workshop. He's held a couple of them already, and they're selling out. So you can learn how to restore a book in the comforts of your own home. Although we are resuming our workshops this Saturday on a limited basis with safety precautions in place, we will be offering these virtual workshops. And from what I understand, Ramon is working on a couple new ones as well. Meanwhile, throughout the pandemic, our mission to protect Sugartown, this amazing 19th century village, has not been suspended at all. Our preservation projects have continued. In June, we restored the chimneys of our 1805 Garrett House, which had been deteriorating from some water damage. They have been repaired, and we are planning some repairs for the book bindery siding later this fall. So preservation never stops. It can't stop. It seems sort of passive when you drive through and everything looks pretty and everything looks well maintained. Well, that's because we work hard at it, and we feel very strongly about making sure historic Sugartown continues to be a part of the community, even though people can't explore it as much as we wish they could right now. So that said, thank you for being with us tonight. And now, without further ado, here's our virtual tour. Thank you.
Sugartown Road in Malvern stands the remarkably intact and lovingly restored 19th century village of Sugartown. In the early 1800s, with the American Revolution behind them, Sugartown's early residents established a school, general store, businesses, and meeting places, creating a vibrant crossroads that provided goods and services to its surrounding farming community. The village was soon known as Sugart's Town, after tavern keeper Eli Shugart, and served as a vital stop for weary travelers hauling wagon loads of goods to the markets of Philadelphia and other parts of the county. Sugartown remained a social, educational, commercial, and municipal center throughout the 1800s. Today, Sugartown offers a window into American life in an early 19th century rural crossroads village. Through the preservation efforts of Historic Sugartown, Inc., visitors experienced how people came together to conduct business, exchange news, and share their lives as a community. The store building was first constructed around 1805 by Joseph Waterman when he built his home and saddle shop next door. It wasn't until John Moore rented the building in 1822 that it was first advertised as a store establishment at Sugartown with an inventory of dry goods, groceries, liquors, glass, china, and Liverpool ware, oils, paintings, drugs, ironmonger, etc. In 1835, Isaac Powell ran the store and was appointed as the first postmaster of Sugartown. The store continued to change hands until it was finally purchased by Sharpless Worrell in 1847. Worrell reopened the store and was named postmaster. In 1874, Sharpless' daughter Hannah married Hilary John, and together they took over proprietorship of the general store. The John family operated the store well into the 1910s. It later became part of John's Antique Shop. Sharpless and his wife Abigail constructed their grand Italianate home in 1860. The house featured elaborate trellises and a hip roof crowned by a belvedere, providing a spectacular view of the surrounding countryside. They made their home here for the rest of their days. In 1885, Hannah and Hilary John moved into the house, presumably to take care of Hannah's elderly parents. A few years after the Johns moved in, they constructed an addition that connected the general store and the home, and that featured a kitchen and bathroom. The Victorian-era toilet, sink, and bathtub are preserved intact on the second floor. Sharpless Worrell passed away in 1885, followed by Abigail in 1896. The Johns remained at the property and passed it on to their 4 children. Beatrice John was the only one of the 4 John children to marry, and her only daughter, Beatrice, inherited the property. Willistown locals fondly remember John's Antique Shop that Beatrice's husband, Frank Huber, ran at the general store complex. Beatrice Huber finally sold the complex to the newly formed historic Sugartown Inc. in December 1982. Ruins of the Worrell barn located behind the house have been maintained as a special landmark on the property. Hannah Cheever constructed her home on Spring Road in 1835. She was recently widowed by Samuel Cheever, the owner of the sign of the Spread Eagle Inn, where Eli Shugart once served as proprietor. When Samuel died in 1830, Hannah continued to run the tavern until she married Isaac Ringwalt. The Ringwalts eventually left Sugartown in 1845, selling their home to Gideon Taylor, who practiced his trade as a tailor at the house. Eventually, Nathan Williams and his wife Susanna purchased the home in 1861. That year, Nathan's son Granville married Elizabeth S. Worrell, daughter of Sharpless and Abigail. Nathan and Susanna turned their home and farm business on Boot Road over to Granville and moved to the Cheever property, making it very convenient for Granville and Lizzie to visit their in-laws. Nathan was a frequent shopper at the general store. In early 2000, a for sale sign went up on the Cheever House property advertising an antique farmhouse with attached tenant house and large bank barn on the corner of Sugartown and Spring Road. Fearing that the early 19th century home and barn would be knocked down to make way for a subdivision, Historic Sugartown stepped in to purchase and restore the property. Today, Historic Sugartown rents out the Cheever House to provide critical operating funds for the organization. Typical of Chester County, the Cheever Barn, a 19th century Pennsylvania bank barn, was constructed so that hay wagons could enter the upper level from the bank. The barn features a large wooden storage tank used to collect water for the animals. With the purchase of the Cheever property, historic Sugartown renovated the old barn. Today, the barn interprets the rich agricultural heritage of Willistown through an agricultural tool exhibit on its upper floor. Historic Sugartown's bookbindery was completed in 2002. It houses a world-class collection of bookbinding tools and equipment once owned by the late master bookbinder Fred Shahada. After serving in World War II, Shahada apprenticed with a German bookbinder in Bremerhaven, Germany. When he and his German wife Elke returned to the United States, they opened a bookbindery in Ardmore, Pennsylvania in 1961. Together, they repaired as many as 200 to 300 books a year for collectors, book dealers, and libraries, and were internationally respected for their work, conserving such works as John Audubon's original prints, the Federalist Papers, and broadsides announcing the Declaration of Independence. Bookbinding tool scholar Steve Baer regards the Shahada collection as the largest in the country in terms of signed 19th century Philadelphia tools. Today, local bookbinder Ramon Townsend of colonialbindery.com teaches a variety of workshops in our bookbindery. Courses range from an introduction to the traditional craft of bookbinding to book restoration and paper marbling. William Garrett constructed the house in 1805 on the corner of his father's Bryn Clovis property. The house is an excellent example of a modified Quaker plan, or three-room plan so prevalently used in homes among the Quaker community. He lived there with his wife Anne and their children Mary Ann, Jemima, and William. Garrett came from a family of a rich Quaker tradition, so when he married Anne, a non-Quaker, it was a scandal in the community and he was written out of the Quaker meeting. Garrett died at the young age of 37 and the home was sold out of the family. It was eventually purchased by Angela B. Matlack, wife of Wilson M. Matlack and daughter of Joachim Bishop, Sugartown's platinum refiner. Angela Matlack shopped at historic Sugartown's general store, appearing frequently in Hilary John's day books in the early 1880s. Angela's husband, Wilson, was a Civil War veteran and served as captain of the Washington Troop of Chester County, the local unit of the National Guard of Pennsylvania in 1874. In 2001, the Garrett House languished along Providence Road as new luxury homes sprung up around it. Before long, the 1805 home was slated for demolition. Historic Sugartown sprung into action, working out a deal to acquire the building if they removed it from the property. Over the course of 2001, the building was lifted from its foundation and began a slow trek to Sugartown. Now restored to its approximate 1805 appearance, the Garrett House is home to a fine collection of Willistown crafted tall case clocks. When historic Sugartown purchased the general store property, this stone structure, which once served as a workshop for the John family, was in ruins, the result of a fire. The Malvern Fire Company constructed and maintained a satellite station on the shop's ruins from 1995 to 2009. In 2010, Historic Sugartown partnered with Chester County Historical Society to create a carriage museum in the building. Collection highlights include an approximate 1800 Conestoga wagon used to haul freight from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, and a hearse used by Undertaker George L. Moore of Guthriesville in the 1870s. Join us for weekend guided tours, in-person book bindery workshops, as well as virtual book restoration workshops. See details at historicsugartown.org. Historic Sugartown, an enchanting glimpse into the past.
Hello again. Oh gosh, it was wonderful to see photographs at the end there with people enjoying the village. We've missed that so much this summer. It's very quiet right now. Again, my name is Heather Reifer. I'm the Executive Director of Historic Sugartown. I've had the privilege of serving as Executive Director here since late 2012. And I'm very happy to be joined by four wonderful individuals. First, we have Tom D'Ottavio. Among our panelists, Tom has the longest and the richest connection, I think, as he served as the general contractor on the restoration of the William Garrett House, the Cheever House, and the book bindery. And he also worked on the general store complex and has been our go-to guy for a lot of our preservation questions and various things over the years. He has an intimate knowledge of all the buildings and their preservation. Excuse me. We're also joined by Faith McCarrick, who has been our Director of Programs and Outreach at Historic Sugartown since 2014. She brings so much creativity to our programs. She developed our lantern tours that we hold in October, our winter tea, and our Sugartown Christmas event, among many other things that she does at the event. If you've ever signed up for a program or a workshop at the book bindery, you've probably either talked, emailed, or just electronically conversed without knowing it with Faith McCarrick. She's very valuable to our team. We also have two of our site guides. First, we have Alicia Marziani, who has been a guide at Historic Sugartown for 5 years and has a degree in historic preservation and a profound knowledge of both Willistown Township's history as well as Malvern's. Her enthusiasm for Historic Sugartown is contagious, and we just love having her on board. Lastly, we have David Tinman, who has been our longest serving guide. He started volunteering with Historic Sugartown in 2005 and eventually became one of our regular guide staff. He has seen through a lot of different changes from the end of the restoration period to now, as we've created a bunch of new programs and explored new things, and he's rolled with the punches. And again, his enthusiasm for Historic Sugartown is wonderful, and if you've ever been on his lantern tour, it's spectacular. So thank you, and I think Kathleen has some questions for us.
We will now begin our Q&A session, and our very first question is, what was your favorite discovery during the restoration of historic Sugartown? And that question will go to Tom.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'd have to say there were many interesting discoveries that we came across when we do what we call selective demolition, which is removing anything in the building that we know not to be part of the original fabric. And in the process, we save many pieces of wood that we're not sure about, and we refer back to them as we go along. My favorite thing that we discovered was the quarter turn stairway in the Hannah Cheever house, which is behind me in the virtual background. When we first started on the project, the staircase did not look like this. The radius portion at some point had been removed. We weren't sure why, but we suspect because the floor joist system sagged 3 inches that some of the parts broke apart. And the stairs was boxed in on both sides and came down and to a landing and turned and went into opposite parlor that I sit in now. We started looking at the treads, and we started noticing that some at the top were worn out more than ones at the bottom. So as we started to do some more demolition, we opened the wall up and realized that the staircase was not actually walled in on both sides, but it was open with balusters and a handrail and treads like you see in this picture behind me. So as we went along, we tried to determine how the bottom part of the staircase finished, because we had no idea that it was a radius. We kind of suspected it was a pretty standard box winder staircase that you see in a lot of older homes. But the measurement from the wall to where the stairs original that was left in place didn't really allow for that type of stair. So we looked further, and we found on the floorboards there was a scored line with a series of broken off nails into the floorboards. We also found a hole in the floor where a newel post most likely went down into for support. And then we actually found a couple of boards in the addition summer kitchen that was built afterwards that had been nailed up into the ceiling for ceiling nailers. And some of these boards had the original nails that were different than the ones used in the summer kitchen, but were used particularly in the original portion of the house. So we started putting pieces of the puzzle together, and we found out that not only that the staircase had a radius on the inside, but the wall that was on the outside of the staircase that you see with the chair rail going up was also radius. So we took a lot of measurements and made some templates, and I contracted a millwork shop who was equipped to build some of the radius pieces that we need, and the handrail and the newel posts, and then we bit by bit assembled it back together, and I'm pretty certain that it's exactly the way it would have been built originally.
Thanks so much, Tom. And I have a follow-up question to that. One of our viewers is saying that their grandparents owned the Cheever house in the 1950s. And it was the first house that they remember living in. When they owned it, there was an apartment connected to the main house by a long room, as this individual remembers it. And they are wondering, was this apartment the current bindery, or was the whole wing removed and the bindery moved to the site?
That's a good question. That foundation of bindery building was actually part of the main house. They were connected to one big building. And it didn't make sense to leave it that way. We wanted to highlight the actual original portion of the Cheever House, and the construction that tied into that is now where the bindery sits was in pretty bad disrepair, and we didn't feel that we wanted to have that all tied together. And because of the acquirement of the bookbinding tools, the idea came up to build a separate building just to house the bookbinding tools. But yes, to answer your question, they were connected at one point.
Thanks for enlightening us on that. And the next question is, how has Sugartown been able to survive 200 years of history in an area of heavy development? And we'll toss that question to Alicia.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. So I absolutely love that historic Sugartown is this little hidden gem. If you've ever driven through our little intersection, you'll know that we are super tucked away right outside of the Malvern Borough. It is just the quaintest little area. I highly recommend coming out to us. And one of the reasons why we're able to provide you with such an amazing little village is because all of the development happened right outside of where we are. Malvern Borough actually became incorporated in 1889, and that actually brought a lot of people into the borough, and it took a lot of the focus outside of the farming area, and it made the borough kind of a more populated area than where we are located currently in Willistown. At that time, Malvern and Willistown were actually part of the same township. They were all Willistown, and Malvern and Willistown broke away. Malvern became a more developed, heavier, developed area, where Willistown stayed pretty rural. If you drive through most of Willistown, you'll notice that it's mostly farms, mostly horses, a lot of open space, and that's what we love here in Willistown, is all of our open space and historic places. So we're really lucky that we have places like Malvern Borough, Westchester Borough, that kind of took a lot of the focus from away from us in Willistown, took the heavier development right outside, and all of the development pretty much stopped around 1900 around historic Sugartown's village. So we're really lucky. I think so.
Thanks so much, Alicia. And the third question is directed to Faith. Faith, what is your favorite type of story to tell about Sugartown?
Well, I want to reiterate what everyone's been saying and thank everyone for coming tonight, but my favorite stories to tell usually revolve around the unconventional people, or the people who don't follow the status quo in our village, even those who might break the rules. They tend to be the most interesting. Some of them were mentioned in the video. We have Hannah Cheever, who actually, once her husband died, as a single woman, petitioned the local courts to run the tavern that she and her husband ran without her husband or a man by her side, which was very unconventional for the 1830s when that happened. We also have William Garrett, who, as the video mentioned, married outside his traditional Quaker faith. And he went to Philadelphia and got married to his wife Anne by a magistrate, which was completely just against what he was supposed to do. But it shows that we have so many individuals in our village who were, able to think outside the box and wanted to do something a little different. Another example I've been researching recently is a woman named Hannah Waterman, who built the original saddle shop and general store with her husband Joseph. And I found out that she was originally a Quaker in the local Goshen Quaker meeting, or Goshen Friends meeting. I know sometimes the terminology is a little different, but she decided in the 1820s to break away from the more Orthodox Quaker faith and join with the Hicksite group, which you have to do a little more research into the Quakers to find out the differences between Orthodox and Hicksite. But again, she was sort of saying, no, I'm gonna decide for myself what I think is right, and I'm gonna make my own path. And finally, I like to tell the story of the scandal that happened at the William Garrett house when it was owned by Wilson and Angela Matlack. We tell the story of how Wilson Matlack was a respected veteran and served as the captain of the local National Guard unit. But unfortunately, he was accused of embezzling, and his leadership came into question. He was accused of embezzling from the group itself, but when the issue went to court, he was acquitted. However, it seems like the community sort of made their opinions known in various different ways, because we have daybooks in our general store that record the information of who was buying what and what they what it cost. And his wife Angela shopped a lot there, and she was formerly referred to as Mrs. Captain Matlack, and then after the scandal, she was no longer in the written recordings in our daybooks referred to as with the title of captain. So it's very interesting. And of course, we don't know if he actually did. He was acquitted, but anything that sort of is unconventional or scandalous is my favorite type of story. So
thanks so much. And Faith, you mentioned the Garrett house. Someone has asked where the Garrett house was located before it was actually moved into the Sugartown village.
Sure. So right now it's off of Sugartown Road when you're in our village, but if you were to head farther down Sugartown Road, I'm directionally challenged. So I'm going to say if you're at the corner of Sugartown and Boot, and you turn to your left and you continue down past the streetscape, you'll hit Providence Road. And then if you go down Providence Road about, I think, a quarter of a mile, maybe a half a mile, you get to where it was originally built. It was across from the Institutes, if anybody's more familiar with the area. And it's right in a group of homes that are large and new.
Steeplechase. Steeplechase is what it's called.
Steeplechase. Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. The next question is, what value does historic Sugartown bring to the community today? And we'll have Heather answer that question.
Here's an image behind me of the Garrett house right as it was starting to be moved over. You can see some of the luxury homes that were being built up around it, which was the reason why Historic Sugartown stepped in to save it. I also want to answer a question that I saw in the Q&A poll. A couple people have asked where the name Sugartown came from. Sugartown has nothing to do with sugar. In 1804, a gentleman by the name of Eli Shugart became proprietor of the Sugartown Tavern, which is on the corner of Sugartown and Dutton Mill Road. It's the next road over from Boot Road where our corner is. And he was only there for 2 years, but he was when he petitioned to get his license, he would say things like, people are troubling me in bad weather. Can I please open a tavern here? He was historic Sugartown, or Sugartown at the time, was pretty much the only game in town. There was nothing on that corner. So when Eli opened his tavern, people quickly started referring to the stop as Shugart's Town. And he was only there for 2 years. And then he left, and we don't know what happened to him from there. We're not sure where he moved on to. The research trail stops dead every single time. But the map starts showing up. You see it at first saying Shugart's Tea on, I think it was like an 1820s or 1830s map. It became common knowledge. And then after that, it squished together and it became Sugartown over time. So that's the answer to that question. In terms of the value of the village today, first a bit of background on me. I grew up on what was my great-grandfather's farm in upstate New York. It was, and throughout my childhood, throughout my life, I've always been surrounded by historic landscapes. And when I first came to Pennsylvania, I was immediately struck with how Chester County's historic landscape was so much of the identity of the people here. And and whether folks know it or not, wherever you drive through, as you're driving through Marshalltown or Sugartown or any of these places, all these little streetscapes, villages, individual homes make up so much of what Chester County is. And, you know, as a historic site director, I look at a place like Sugartown and I think, well, how can this place connect with people today? How can we continue to make it relevant? So I feel like our charge is to keep being creative and what kinds of programs we have, what kinds of offerings we do, like the beer gardens or the Sugartown Christmas, which brings families in to enjoy. Yeah, and by doing that, I feel like I hope at least, that we instill a sense of value among the people who come here, so they start to value and start feeling like Sugartown is part of their home, or Chester County is their home, and give them a reason to care and to love these places and to give them a sense of roots. I have a deep sense of roots to, you know, where I grew up in upstate New York, but you know, I hope that folks who grow up here get that same kind of feeling through the experiences they have within their communities. And I hope Historic Sugartown's a part of that.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. One of our viewer wants to know, what is the connection of the bookbindery to Sugartown? Didn't the original bookbinder work in Ardmore? And that's a question for Dave.
Hi, Kathleen, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I'll be glad to answer your question. We acquired the Shahada's bookbinding collection in 2002 because one of the former director of Sugartown, John Nagy, was a historian, and he had a lot of old books that he had acquired over the years that needed the spines rebound in the books. And so he came upon the Shahadas in Ardmore, and over time found out that the Shahadas were going to retire and start selling off their collection of bookbinding tools and implements piece by piece. And so Historic Sugartown decided to acquire the collection and build the bookbindery specifically to house the collection. So when you walk in the building and you can see the virtual background, you can see the shelving and the cabinetry with the display of all these different implements and tools that were in the Shahada's bookbinding shop in Ardmore. So it's really great that we were able to keep all of these tools and implements together. I think we've cataloged them. There's over 2,500 different little implements and tools and items in the bookbindery. So it's the display when you come in, when you visit, I think it's just overwhelming as soon as you walk in the room and you see this great visual display of everything there. And then the siding and the cabinetry are made of cedar. So when you walk in the room, not only is it visually stimulating, but the smell of the cedar, it's great. So you get a great energy as soon as you walk into that bookbindery.
And Dave, follow-up question, could you describe what it would be like if we would take one of the workshops at the bindery?
I think you'll have a blast. Again, it's such a great environment to be in, surrounded by all this historic antiques. And Ramon, who's our resident bookbinder, teaches a variety of classes from beginners all the way up to complex book restoration. And so, for example, the introduction class that I took, I think the most difficult obstacle I had to overcome was threading the needle to get started. And once I got that, it was smooth sailing. Ramon has great teaching techniques, and the classes are very small, so you get some really individual attention. And so, just as an example, in the intro class, you are set up at a sewing station with a needle and thread, and you're given about half a dozen folded sets of paper, and you actually have to sew each one of those sections of paper together. And when you're done with the sewing, you wind up with the foundation of your book. And then in the class, you attach that sew together paper to a book cover, and then you get to decorate your book cover. And at the end of the workshop, you walk out of the class with the book that you put together with your own two hands. And for me, that was really a great accomplishment. And it gives you a sense of a wonder of the material and the labor behind actually putting a book together. And it gives you a better appreciation for books that we have. So again, I think if you take the class in-house or virtually, you'll have a really great time.
Thanks so much, Dave. This is an open question for anyone who would like to answer it. Someone is questioning whether a cemetery was found in Sugartown.
There is not, no. The Worrell family was all buried in various cemeteries around the area. We're not so sure about the Matlacks and some of the other ones. It's something we'd love to investigate further.
One thing Heather's not mentioning is that we have gone on cemetery hunts to find
Yes,
family members. We found the John family in Greenmount Cemetery in Westchester, and I dragged my poor husband to Cumberland Cemetery in around the Media area, Lima area, and that's where most of the Worrell, the original Sharpless and Abigail and their children are buried.
Thank you, both of you. And we have a question about the Garrett House and the moving that you referred to earlier. The last person that talked on that was Heather. Heather, there was a question for Tom in reference to that, and that was how accurate the restoration was on that. And when the house was actually moved, is there a wood frame beneath the facade? How did that work?
I don't know if you can see the picture behind me, but I'll let Tom talk. There it is.
Yeah, the second question, the house is completely constructed of stone. The walls are 18 inches thick, and if I remember correctly, it weighed approximately 370 tons when it was moved. And the other question regarding the basement, there were two fireplace buttresses, one on each end, one under the two diagonal fireplaces, and then another one under the big cooking fireplace. And they were photographed, and templates were made of them so that they could be reconstructed in the new foundation. The new foundation was constructed of concrete block, double layered, filled solid, and the inside of the walls were plastered in an undulating type of a manner to make them look like it was parged over the original stone. The buttresses were reconstructed. The floor joists that were in place came with the building. In other words, when they put those beams in that you see in that picture, they go under the floor joists. And there was a main summer beam. It was about 12 by 14 or something like that inches, ran from one end of the building to the other, that was in disrepair and had been cut up. And that was replaced by way of removing the floorboards, removing one half of the joist out of the building, and then the beam put in place, and the original joist put back exactly where they were, and the original flooring reinstalled over top. So the foundation is not original, but most of the other parts are, that you can see.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, I was told that because the house was so big that we weren't allowed to move it down the roads. So what they actually had to move it, they built a wooden track through the field that goes back behind Sugartown, and it was pulled very, very slowly down this wooden track to get it to where it is now. But before they actually put it in the foundation, they had to shut down Spring Road and bring all the utility lines, the telephone, the electric down, so the house wouldn't knock all that down. So
There's another photo of it closer.
That's correct. But they were not wooden boards. They were actually steel plates, 1 inch thick, that were laid on the ground. Otherwise, the weight of the house would have sunk the wheels into the ground.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Tom. And we will take only 2 more questions. The first one is, where do your funds come from for the restoration of this beautiful village?
So we rely greatly on individual contributions through the community. We were founded by John Nagy and Penelope Wilson, and we still, Penelope is one of our main supporters, but we do very much rely on individual contributions beyond that. And as well as our programs and special events. Now our special events this year have been completely shut down, so that funding did not come through. Another interesting thing about Historic Sugartown is we get some operating income from the rental of some of our buildings. We have commercial office spaces in our Worrell House, as well as we rent out the Cheever House, which I think it was mentioned in the video. And that is about 30% of our income. So we rely heavily on that as well, and that provides a nice stable base for us, especially now when we can't be open and none of our program and event income is coming in. But we very much rely on support from the community and the enthusiasm of the people around. Someone else asked about how we how we communicate our preservation message to the community, and we try to infuse that in everything we do, from the guided tours that Alicia and David give, through the workshops, and getting people excited about the collections in there as they're working. And when we do a preservation project, like back in June when we did the chimney project, we normally, if we were there, we would make it a little bit more accessible for people to watch. We couldn't this time around, but we did have it out on social media, some of the photographs from the restoration of the chimneys, that conveying that preservation is definitely something that we have to remain vigilant on all the time, or else, as we put it all the time, we could paint now or we could replace later, so it's a constant thing, and we try to get that out in all of our materials as we develop them. So.
Excellent. And our last question this evening, one of our viewers is interested in finding out what the Quaker 3-room plan is that was referenced earlier in tonight's program.
Sure, I will actually talk about that because I am in front of the fireplace in the Garrett house right now. If you guys can see this, Tom also talked about there was, they had to replace some stuff underneath here. This is one of 3 fireplaces in this first floor of the house. 1805 houses definitely needed some fireplaces. So what the house plan is you walk through the front door and you immediately are greeted with a stairway going up, and then you have 2 entrances on either side. The entrance off to the left, right when you walk in, that's actually for your hearth room, which is where we're standing, or where I'm standing right now. So there's another space on the other side, and then you have the hearth there. On the opposite side of where we are, there's 2 rooms set up. There are diagonal fireplaces, also like Tom said, that mirror each other. So they're opposite of each other on the walls there. And they are just 2 rooms. They would have been used for greeting people, family, general living spaces. And then if you were to go upstairs, it almost mirrors the same floor plan, where the rooms directly above the 2 diagonal fireplace rooms, the exact same upstairs. And then on the other side, there's a little nursery and another small little room. But the first floor is what they specifically are talking about here. And you can actually find floor plans online, where you can look at different Quaker floor plans if you're interested. The 3 floor plan is actually a very common floor plan, especially here in Chester County. So you find that a lot in older houses here.
Thanks so much, Alicia. And that concludes our Q&A. We have a special closing for you at this time. On behalf of all of us, we hope you've enjoyed tonight's program and look forward to having you tune in to additional webinars in our Town Tour and Village Walk series. We also invite you to a brand new virtual heritage series, which will launch in September by the Chester County Historic Preservation Network. Our special thanks to the Chester County Planning Commission, the Historic Sugartown team, CCHPN, our planning and production teams, and all of you, our viewers, for making this program possible. Tonight's presentation will be uploaded onto YouTube for later viewing, and there will be links from the Chester County Town Tours and Village Walks page with the Chester County Planning Commission. And we close tonight with a special video entitled Lives Rooted in Places. This video was produced by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And this is our wish for you this evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a sensational summer.
Our stories, our memories, our lives are rooted in places. Some are grand, the stuff of legends. Some are personal, known only to you. Historic places are scattered across our country, in our greatest cities, nestled among corner markets and clothing stores, or out in the fields, on mountains, at the end of dirt roads. Some have been meticulously cared for. Others have been forgotten by all but a few, who are bringing them back to life and help the rest of us to remember. All of these places shape the story of who we are, where we come from, where we're going. They remind us of what we've gone through, honoring our proudest moments and acknowledging the wounds we are still working to heal. Old places inspire us and help us to imagine what comes next. Because these places belong to all of us, we must save them for ourselves, each other, and our future together.